So thank you all for coming. I have to confess that I've known Sheldon for 25 years. He's had a big influence on my life, I have to say, acknowledge that. So the first thing I want to do is welcome you back to PCC after such a successful career, and we're really proud of you. I guess you didn't know you were a hometown legend, but now it's official.
This is the first word I've had of it, so it's...
Anyway, in your spare time, you can sort of put the plaque up. So, so Pasadena, you grew up in Hastings Ranch, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. And it was a different world, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I know you told me the story that you had a guy who was a milkman who lived next door to you, bought a house, raised kids. Was that a lie? I don't know.
I don't remember me telling that story,
Okay.
but maybe someone else did. But certainly there were people in the neighborhood who had modest incomes. My parents bought the house in 1952, the year I was born. Yes, I've given it away. And I think they paid $13,000 for the house. Yeah, yeah, and on the GI Bill. And my dad worked at Douglas Aircraft, started there. He went to PCC for 1 year.
Right.
And then in 1939, Douglas was hiring, and the war was going on in Europe, and they needed airplanes. So he went down there and worked there for 42 years.
So let's get the list of schools that you went to. I know well, let's start with your elementary school.
Don Benito Elementary up there in the Hastings Ranch, which is still there.
And then
Marshall.
Okay.
And then PHS.
Okay.
And then PCC.
So PHS, let's stop for a second,
Okay.
because you did some theater there, right?
Lots.
Yeah.
Lots. I was.
So you weren't an athlete particularly.
Can't you tell? No, I was not an athlete. I got into the Pasadena High School drama department, and in those days, it was the place to be if you were a nerdy kid who needed a lot of attention, and that was me. There was a wonderful teacher there named Abel Franco who ran that department for years and had a tremendous influence on my life. In fact, I like to tell a couple stories about Abel. One is that when my wife and I got married, for our first anniversary present, because first anniversary is paper, she got me an original Hirschfeld. I don't know if any of you that Al had done. It was called Actors Who Have Found Their Roles, and there are quite a few very famous people in this drawing. I think there's 12 actors in this drawing, and Kevin Kline is in it, and Tom Conti is in it, and Judd Hirsch is in it. And Abel Franco is in it because he was on Broadway at the time doing Zoot Suit, written by Luis Valdez. And he played Eddie Olmos's father. Eddie was the star of the original production, and Abel played Eddie's father. And they took that to Broadway. And I remember when Luis was first working that play out, because, well, that's another story. But anyway, so I greatly appreciate having that hanging in my office. I look at it every day, and I feel like Abel is looking down on me and maybe a little bit proud of me.
I'm sure he is.
And now the little theater at PHS is called the Abel Franco Theater. And I had nothing to do with getting it named, but once it got named, they didn't have the money to put letters up on the side of the building to acknowledge that. So I said, I'll pay for that. So I put the letters up there. So I did at least that much.
So you graduate from PHS, so what are you going to do now?
Well, exactly. And go to college, even though my parents could have cared less whether I went to college. But I wanted to go to college. We didn't have any money.
Well, in fact, your dad said go work at Douglas, right?
My dad said go work at Douglas. Yeah, yes, he said to me one evening at my senior year, so when do you finish? And I said, well, middle of June. And he said, all right, well, the next Monday you'll come down to Douglas and you'll start. And I said, I don't think so. But thank God PCC was there. And I really mean this. Thank God PCC was there and that it cost nothing for me to go there, because there was no money for me to go to college. And I have to say also that I was not emotionally ready to go away to a 4-year school. A lot of you probably did and flourished, but I was not emotionally ready at that time. So thank God PCC was there, because then I got my general ed done, and I had some great experiences there. I worked with Bob Wright, who headed up the TV department at PCC for years, and he was very encouraging. And then I was able to transfer to UCLA very easily from PCC, so it was great.
And then you got an MFA, was it, at screenwriting degree afterwards?
Well, yeah, I graduated from UCLA and got a BA in motion pictures and television, they called it, which sounds like such a BS degree, but and kind of is. But boy, did I get to see a lot of great movies. It was wonderful. And then when I finished at UCLA, I was like, that was really the now what moment.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know what to do. And so I did what everybody does when they don't know what to do. I went to grad school. And I went there for a year, and then happily, while I was there, I met a wonderful man named Bill Frug, who was teaching screenwriting. He was the most feared screenwriting teacher at UCLA, but he was also still working in the business, which is why he was so feared, because he actually knew what he was doing. And Bill liked my work and got me my first job.
So you told me you were working at the Sierra Madre Library.
I worked there for 8 years.
Right, and
Yeah.
it's like, don't give up your day job. You're holding on to that to see until finally,
God
right?
bless the Sierra Madre Public Library. Too. I started there at the age of 16, and I worked there until I was 24. And I went from page at $1.65 an hour up to library assistant. And the friends of the library actually came to me at one point and said, we would like to honor you with a full scholarship to USC Library School if you would like to go to library school. And arrogant little kid that I was, I said, I want to be in show business. And they were all like, yeah, it's darling, but really, we'd like to send you to, and I did turn them down. I mean, today I could be head librarian at the Sierra Madre Public Library.
Yeah, and it'd be a lot of laughs too, right?
But, you know, I threw caution to the wind and pursued this silly career.
Well, so for your first job, actually, you were still in grad school, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
Well, again, Bill Frug had liked my work. They didn't teach you how to write sitcoms, and those of you who don't like sitcoms, and I know there are people here who don't like them, and that's fine. But you're probably all of the mind, well, a monkey could write one of those shows. And sometimes, I have worked with a few monkeys, so. But they didn't teach you how to write sitcom at UCLA. It was beneath them. You could only learn how to write movies. So I wrote on my own at night, you know. But Bill was in television, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to write sitcoms." He said, "What do you got?" And I said, "I have a stack at home." He said, "Well, bring me in the two best ones." So I brought him in a spec Mary Tyler Moore show and a spec Bob Newhart show. The first one, the one that you really all love, where he was the psychologist with Susie Plachette and all of that. I brought those two in. Bill marked them up with red ink and with all kinds of expletives in the margins about how bad my writing was. And I worked on them and worked on them and worked on them and worked on them. And then finally I got both of them in kind of shape where he wasn't embarrassed to take them out. And then, bless his heart, he worked the town for 6 months and finally got it to somebody, and then I got a job.
Yeah, and you know, the thing about people say,
I know.
Yeah, there you are.
You're applauding Bill, I understand, and that's great, and that's appropriate.
You know, they always talk about how do you get in the business. You get in the business by writing. You write.
Yes. Yeah, I had a stack. I'd written like 15 of these. And but those were the two that Bill wanted to take out. So those were the two.
So you get a
out.
job offer out of the blue.
Really out of the blue. I came home from grad school one day, and there was a message from this guy named Bill Idelson, who was a writer on a brand new show. And he said, "Can you come over to NBC and meet with me?" So I called him back, and I said, "Well, when?" And he said, "Now." And I said, "Okay." And I got my car and drove over to NBC, and we talked, and he liked me, and so he took me into Arnold Margolin, who was running the show at the time. Arnold created Love American Style, and is still a dear friend of mine. He's 83. And whenever he lives in New York now. Whenever he comes to L.A., he stays in our guest room, and we call it Arnold's room, and it's just for him. But he hired me, and I got $250 a week. I was making less than the writer's assistants, but that was okay. I was there on the Writers Guild Apprentice program. So I started there, and then from that, I was able to get another job and another job and another.
So it was come in the next day, right?
It was come in tomorrow. Yeah, and in fact, it was come in Saturday. That first Saturday, I drove out to Arnold's house in Malibu and worked with him on a script all day. I don't know why he wanted to work with me. I think he was mad at everybody else at that point. But I went out and worked with him, and yeah, it went on.
So Monday you quit grad school, right? Was that
Oh, the next day. Yeah, the next day. Goodbye, UCLA. Thank you very much. This has been great. Yeah.
So they threw you right into the pool.
Oh, yeah, right in. Yeah.
So maybe, probably everybody doesn't know about how comedy writing works on these TV shows.
Yeah.
So you're the new kid.
Yeah.
In the room.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they're writing scripts. So what usually happens in television, if you know this, I'll go through it as fast as I can. Somebody, they work out a story. So the producers of the show will work out a story. You'll figure out, well, what's the main character going to do this week, and you come up with something. Sometimes it takes a couple hours, sometimes it takes a couple days to come up with a story that works. Then you really lay it out in detail, and then a writer is selected. Most of the time, that's not how we do it on Mom, but most of the time, a writer's selected, and you go off and you write a script based on the outline that you have worked out with the producers, and then you bring it back. They hate it. You write another version. They hate that. You write another version. They say, oh, this one we love. And then it goes to the actors, and you go, if you're a freelance writer, you go off. I remember I wrote an episode of a show for Bud Yorkin years ago, and they told me, this is the best script we've ever gotten. And then I came 5 or 6 weeks later to see the show. There wasn't a word left of what I had written. And Bud has me stand up, and isn't it wonderful that this young man has written this script? And I hadn't written a word of it. But I got the money.
You have to, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You have to kill your children when you're in television.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the way we do, so that's the way most shows work. When I did MASH, I went in. They had read a script, a spec MASH actually, that I had written that they liked very much, but was a little too controversial for them to do because I had Hawkeye kill a guy by accident, but I had him kill a guy. But it got their attention, which was the whole idea. So then they said, we want you to write an episode of MASH. Come on in, pitch us some stories. Now they were in their 7th, 8th, 9th year, something like that. So there weren't a lot of new stories to do, but I came up with one, thank God. I pitched them 8 or 9 stories. They liked one. So then we all worked it out together, and then I went home and wrote it, and then they did like it, and so then they asked me to write another one, and that was the MASH experience.
So really that was your testing ground, and then you went on to do, which was next? Was it Newhart next?
Well, yeah. I mean, MASH came after I'd done a few other shows. I did a show. The first show that Arnold hired me on was a show called The McLean-Stevenson Show. We only did 8 episodes, and I've always said that was 7 too many. It was a terrible show. I mean, it was really abominable. And then I went on a show called Fish, which was a spinoff of the Barney Miller Show. And then I went on the Betty White Show and got to work with Betty, which was a wonderful experience, and Betty's still with us. And then somewhere in there I did the 2 MASHes, and then a bunch of other shows after it. Angie, and then I think Newhart. Oh no, and then It's a Living, and then Newhart.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned actors Betty White. So what kind of interaction do the writers have with the star?
Well, a lot, and depending on the personality of the star, it's either delightful, as it is on Mom, because I love Allison Janney, and she's just a doll to work with, and Anna Faris is a doll to work with, and so is all of our cast. But sometimes the star is not the world's nicest person, and so then sometimes it's very challenging.
Who are you talking about specifically?
I am not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. Craig T. Nelson. Yeah, but yes, you interact with them. I mean, I see our actors when we're in production. I see them every day. Monday morning, we have a table read. We take the script that we're going to do. Now, on our show, we write it as a group because Chuck Lorre, who is the executive producer of our show and also did The Big Bang Theory and 2.5 Men and Mike and Molly and Young Sheldon, and he has a show on Netflix called The Kaminsky Method with Michael Douglas and Alan Arkin. That show drops, season 2 drops on Friday, by the way, and I absolutely recommend it because the second season is fantastic. But Chuck likes to write as a group, so we write the scripts together as a group. Today we were in the office, our group, we have 5 people in our group, and we were working out a story, and then Chuck came in to give us some notes on a script that we had given him last night. So we went through the whole script with Chuck for about an hour, and he had, as usual, brilliant ideas, and we put those all in. And then we said, hey, we're working on this, what do you think? And we kind of pitched it to him generally. He said, I love that, go write that. And again, he had a couple of good ideas. So that now tomorrow we'll start writing that one.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's an unusual experience in a way in television to be that organized. You said the schedule's reasonable, because
yes,
people have worked on shows that are
and
horrible
so have
in terms of time. Yeah.
I've worked on plenty of shows where I was there till 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, like every night. But Chuck is incredibly organized, and he hires very experienced people who know what they're doing. So yeah, once we get the script written, then Monday morning we all sit at a big table, all the actors and all the writers, and they read the script out loud. Now they've had it over the weekend, so they've had a chance to bone up on it a little bit. We read it, we listen to and then there are other people there too. There are people from the network, there are people from the studio, there are other people that work on the show, and we just kind of gauge the laughs as we're going along. And if a joke doesn't get much, I put a little check next to it, and then we go back to the office afterwards, and we do a rewrite, which maybe takes an hour and maybe takes 5 hours, Then Tuesday we go over and see a run-through of the whole episode at about noon or 1 o'clock. Then we talk to the actors about how you're doing with it and everything, and then we do another rewrite, then we do the same thing on Wednesday, and then Thursday we start shooting, because now, when I first started, sitcoms were like 6 scenes. The Mary Tyler Moore Show in its heyday was 6 scenes, 3 scenes in the first act, then it's a commercial, then 3 scenes in the second act, and then a little tag at the end. And you could shoot those all in one night, and that's what we did. Now we have 9, 10, 12, 14 scenes in an episode, because audiences don't want to sit through those long scenes anymore, and they like you to move around. Seinfeld really kind of broke the mold of all that.
Yeah, short attention span theater, yeah.
Yeah, so we shoot half of the show on Thursday, and we usually shoot the scenes where the sets are located on the stage in a place where the audience couldn't see them anyway. Or if we're doing a scene in a car or something like that, we'll shoot that on Thursday. And we get about half the show shot on Thursday. Then Friday night, a live audience like you comes in, and then we do the rest of the show for them. And we show them the scenes that we did yesterday. With the new technology, what we shot yesterday is completely edited and ready to go the next day. So they're able to see the entire episode. And it takes about 2.5 hours to get through it on Friday night, and they get a piece of pizza, and then they go home.
So as you can see, it's such a collaborative process. Everybody, the actors are involved, the writers are involved, and the audience is involved. And I've always thought that sitcom is the closest to theater, to live theater, that there is.
Yeah,
you know?
And that's Desi Arnaz, because in the old days of radio, they would have audiences come in for the Jack Benny show and that kind of stuff. But it was Desi who felt that Lucy really needed an audience to work in front, because most sitcoms in the 50s were single camera shows. They were shot like a movie. The way MASH is, the way Silicon Valley is, those shows. But Desi said Lucy needs an audience. So they would do the show in a proscenium style, like a play. And they would bring an audience in because she needed the laughs, and actors who love comedy really respond to that. Allison Janney, when we first started this show, was terrified to work in front of an audience because she was a stage actress, but she was also a film actress, and she was used to being able to do it over and over again and all of that, and she was terrified. And boy, did she take to it. Because she has the audience in the palm of her hand on Friday night, and it's so much fun to watch. It's like watching Carol Burnett. You know,
Yeah.
she knows what to do.
So, you had said to me once, and I mean, this sort of gets into the weeds of comedy, but I think it's important. You said that you should never mortgage your character for a joke. And people think about sitcoms as joke, 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 but really they are slices of life. They are character-driven. I mean, in that way, it's like theater too. Yes. And you cannot your jokes have to fit your character. Your situation has to fit the character. So it becomes very natural in that way.
Yeah, I mean, if you hate all sitcoms, there's no talking to you. But if you If there's one you've seen that you kind of liked, okay, it's probably because it was character driven. There are shows that are just joke, 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 and those usually go away very quickly. They're starting to cancel shows already on the networks. But if you're liking it, it's because it's character driven. And yeah, it wasn't me that came up with that quote. That was Billy Idelson that told me that. Never mortgage a character for a joke. And what that means is don't write a joke that the character wouldn't say. And Billy always used to say, write it as a drama first. He would say, the first draft, don't worry about the jokes. Just make sure that the characters are talking to each other like human beings and reacting like human beings to whatever is happening. And he said, then after you get it down and it makes sense and it's honest and it's real, then go back and put the jokes in. And he said, you will find that the jokes come naturally, and they do. I have always said that the easiest part of writing for comedy is the jokes. Those are the easiest part. It's writing a good story that's the hard part, and creating believable characters.
Right, and wouldn't you agree too that that's a very collaborative process, because you see an actor and that actor sort of becomes the character.
Yes.
And then it's in a way it's easier to write for, in a sense. Is that right?
Exactly, exactly. And a character evolves over time. When we started Mom, we didn't really know who those people were. We had done a pilot. I wasn't even there for the pilot, but they had done a pilot. But as you go to run-throughs and as you work with these actors on a day in and day out basis, you see what they can do. You see what their strengths are, and you see what their weaknesses are. In other words, you see the stuff that, let's not give them that kind of stuff anymore. Like, some actors are great with physical comedy, and some actors are very uncomfortable with it. So, Allison thought she was going to be terrible at physical comedy, and she, again, has turned into Carol Burnett. She'll do anything. The character evolves over time, and then hopefully in the third, fourth, fifth season, the series really takes off and finds itself.
So I don't know how many of you have seen Mom, but the premise really is very interesting. Yeah, raise hands. That's good. Good show. And highly rated too, I have to say, for good reason.
Yes, I think we're the second highest rated comedy on television now, after Young Sheldon, which is also a Chuck Lorre show. So if you want to hit, hire Chuck Lorre.
Yeah, and pay him a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, just talking about the changes in half hour since you started in MASH and the other shows like that, the Mom has a very sort of interesting premise, which is that a lot of the family or the characters are in recovery. It's kind of about recovery.
It's a show about recovering from alcoholism.
Right.
That's what the show's about. That's the funny theme of Mom.
Yes, you pitch that and everybody goes, yeah, let's make that show.
Yeah, only Chuck could have gotten that show.
Yeah, of course. So that's different from.
Yes, it's very different.
So
in the old days, the families were upstanding, and the parents knew, the father knows best. Leave it to Beaver. The Donna Reed show. It was that kind of stuff. But All in the Family was the one that really broke the mold, and suddenly, shows were taking on issues and matters that maybe people didn't talk about so much. And that's one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about doing this show, is that it's about recovery from alcoholism. It is about that there is life after sobriety and that life is actually better. We have had a tremendous response. You know, we've been honored by the Congress of the United States and by the Los Angeles District Attorney and by the LA City Council, and we've won a lot of awards, not ones that you've heard of, but from organizations that are about domestic violence or about recovery. I had a woman that Annette and I know who is a therapist in New England, and she said, I can't tell you how many people have come into our clinic seeking treatment because they saw Mom.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that makes us the happiest.
Well, you know, and people say it's just a sitcom and this is, but if you look at half-hour television and comedy, it's really a cultural mirror, is what it is.
Yes.
I mean, starting with MASH in the post-Vietnam era, All in the Family.
Yes.
You know, right up to what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's so important what you're doing, Sheldon, and I hope they pay you well for this.
You know, another great thing that Billy Idelson said to me at the very beginning of my career was, he says, now look, you're going to be getting some big checks. And he said, you're going to feel a little funny. He said, this is what I want you to remember. He says, if you think they're paying you for your talent, you'll always feel overpaid and guilty. But he says, if you think that they're paying you for the aggravation, you'll always feel underpaid and justified. And I've always tried to think of it that way.
Can anybody in this room relate to that? All right, so the changes in comedy and the cultural reflection. It's funny, I have a quote here from Edmund Kean, who was a famous Shakespearean actor in the Renaissance.
I didn't know him.
You didn't know him, no. Well, by the way, you're probably one of the more elderly sitcom writers. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I didn't work for 13 years because, as many of you may know from the news, about 20 years ago, the networks and studios all conspired to run all of us out of the business who were over 40. And they were successful in doing that. And then there was a big lawsuit that the Writers Guild brought against the studios and networks, and they won the lawsuit. And in compensation for the 13 years I couldn't work, I got a check for $22,000.
Yeah, me too.
Isn't that wonderful?
I put a patio in with that.
I know, I know. But yes, I'm older now. Chuck and I are the same age. He's 1,000 times more successful than I am, but we are the same age, and he's comfortable having writers around him that are his age, and he appreciates that. He appreciates our experience, and he knows how to use it.
And a lot of your staff is actually older by sitcom standards, right?
Yeah, although we're a kind of a nice mix. I'm the oldest. There's a couple. Somebody is 60. There are several people in their 50s, there are several people in their 40s, and there are a couple of people in their 30s.
So how about the diversity thing? I mean, PCC is all about diversity. I'm wondering about television, and I know it's an uphill
Television
climb.
is still struggling with that.
Yeah.
It's struggling with that mightily, and it's very hard to find, particularly writers who are from different backgrounds than, when I first broke in, everybody was Jewish, I mean, they would say to me, what are you doing in this business? You people aren't funny.
Sheldon, aren't you Jewish?
I'm not, but thank God for the name Sheldon because it helped me to pass. But, they didn't think a Goyim could write comedy. And
you showed them, didn't you?
Well, but now, yes, we like to have, a more diverse. Now, I have to confess that the mom staff is not diverse. It's half women.
Well, there you go.
And one of our creators is female, and she runs the show, and she's my boss, and I love working with her. God bless her. But now, like Chuck's new show, Bob Hart's Abishola, which is, if you haven't seen it, it's really delightful. Billy Gardell, who was in Mike and Molly. But it's about a white man who falls in love with a woman from Nigeria. she's his nurse when he has a heart attack, and he falls in love with her in the hospital and then courts her, and she's not the least bit interested in him. And it's just delightful. And the woman who created that show with Chuck is from Nigeria herself. She's a stand-up Nigerian comedian. But they have a very diverse staff on that show. And there was and Big Bang had quite a few. They had Hispanic writers, and they had a couple of black writers on that show. But it is hard to find those folks. And so if PCC can help some of these young kids and call me, you know, I'm serious. Call me, and if I can do anything, I will.
Yeah, because there's a lot of talent. You know, as we sit in Caltech's Athenaeum, Big Bang is an amazing show, and how do you pitch that? Unless you're Chuck Lorre, you can't.
No.
Yeah.
No. The thing that was the key, I mean, Chuck had a big hit with Dharma and Greg, but it was 2.5 Men that really did it for him, and that was, you know, basically The Odd Couple with a kid. But it worked, and it worked huge, and it was such a big success. But then CBS was basically, whatever you want to do, we'll support it. And so then Big Bang, I'm sure it was a show they weren't, you know, comfortable with, but it worked like crazy. And then he was able to do Mike and Molly and take on a series about struggling with your weight. And now he's able to do our show about struggling with alcoholism, and now he's able to do a show about an interracial relationship. So it's wonderful.
So, you know, it's people probably don't realize how tough it is. You know, you talk about how tough show business is, but, you know, getting to be a staff writer on a television show is about twice as hard as getting into the NBA, essentially.
I equate the two. It's about the same as getting. There's about the same number of slots. Yeah.
So how do you do it? I mean, I really think in your case, as I've known you a while, it's really your talent and your interest and all that. But then I know there's a diversity of backgrounds. People come out of stand-up. People come out of theater. They come out of all kinds of places.
From everywhere.
Yeah.
When I have spoken at PCC, there's a club there, radio and television engineers or something like that, and they've invited me like 4 times to come and speak to them. So I come at lunchtime, and I give a little talk, and I always give the same talk. And I say you need 3 things. You need talent, you need determination, and you need a lucky break. And I say that talent is the least important because I know a lot of very, very successful people who have very little talent but a tremendous amount of determination. But without determination, you're not going anywhere. And that's something that we really have to instill in our young people is that drive. You know, I mean, it's in you anyway or it isn't, but if we can give them a little bit of a push and a little bit of encouragement, I think that's really important. But
well, you just a shout out to PCC on that, and I know you're aware of this. Of our 28,000 students, we have so many first-generation students, and they're on fire.
I mean, was
they're
too.
Very ambitious. Yeah,
I was a first generation.
And there are people in this room who are very successful who were first-generation students at PCC.
Yeah.
So it's really, it's so important.
But it's very tough to break in now. We have writers' assistants and production assistants on our show who want to be TV writers. And so what we do is we give them an opportunity, like on Friday night or on Thursday when we're shooting. If a joke doesn't work and we're huddling around trying to come up with a new joke, we let them participate. And if they have a good joke, we put it in. And if they get enough good jokes, then we put them on staff. So you might have to spend several years going and getting lunch for a bunch of very finicky comedy writers. No lettuce and just a little bit of mayonnaise, and it shouldn't be too fatty, and and it's very difficult. The lunch order is the hardest part of the day. But they pay their dues, and then they get to hang around with us, and also one of our production assistants came to my office the other day and said, "Can I pitch you a story?" And I said, "Yeah." So he pitched me a story, and I said, "I love that story. That's a great story. Go pitch that to Nick, who's our showrunner." And I just sent Nick a text. I said, "Preston's going to come down. He's going to pitch you a story. I love it," and he went down and pitched it to him. So, and I think we're going to do it.
So let's go to the 30,000-foot level a little bit for television, because I know everybody's interested in that. So we have streaming services, we have Netflix and this, we have, and you know, the broadcast, it used to be everybody remembers 3 networks. That was it.
God, those were the days.
Yeah.
We used to get a 30 share, you know, and Laverne and Shirley used to get a 44 share, which means 44% of the people watching television were watching Laverne and Shirley.
And you're in the top 10 now, and what's your share?
We're in the top 20 now, because it's football takes up like the first 9 slots. You know, and then the reality shows, you know, The Voice and all that stuff, and then you get down to us, and I think we're 20 right now. But our share, a 1, a 2, yeah. We have now. This gets into the new world that we have. They have the overnight ratings, which you get the day after the show is on. Then you get a little later in the day, you get the nationals, which are the overnights are just from the big cities. Then you get the nationals from the whole country. Then they have ratings +3, which is the ratings that come in for the people who watched it on their DVR in the next 3 days. Then you have ratings +7. Then you have ratings +14. Then you have ratings +30. Now, when they get done counting, we have about 12 million viewers every week. Yeah, which is good. It's not the 50 million that All in the Family used to get, but compared to what everybody else is getting and how many choices you all have every night, those are pretty good numbers.
And the economics of it have changed, like the streaming services, Netflix, they'll cancel you kind of at the drop of a hat, and there's no big payday at the end for syndication.
That's what people are finding out about Netflix. I know guys that have made big deals at Netflix, and then and it's like, and your big payday comes when season 3 starts, and they get done with season 2, and they go, okay, they're going to bring the Brinks truck to my house, and then they cancel it.
Yeah, what happens is, it used to happen anyway, is that, well, Coach, which Sheldon co-created.
Not technically, but
okay.
yes, I was there from the beginning, and I did have a piece of the show. Lucky me. But I didn't literally co-create. I didn't have that credit.
So, but what happens is that after a certain number of episodes, which was how many?
Well, my points vested after the 3rd season, and then the enormous checks started to arrive.
Yeah, but it goes into syndication, which is the big sale.
Yeah.
But now there's no more syndication in effect. I mean,
there is and there isn't. I mean, Mom is in syndication, and Gemma Baker, who is my boss on the show, and I was working with all day today, just bought a beautiful house on the lake in Lake Arrowhead to go up and enjoy on the weekend.
Nobody's poverty.
She's fine. Yeah. But it isn't. It's not. The last big deals were like Seinfeld. The Big Bang Theory, the syndication deal was enormous. And then Netflix or HBO just bought Big Bang for the 2nd run, and I think they paid $500 million for it. So Chuck is fine.
Somebody's making money.
Yeah, and I work for him. His name is Chuck Lorre.
Yeah. So, but back to the 30,000 foot. So what happens here? I mean, does broadcast television just wither on the vine?
I don't think so.
I mean, there's so much on. How do you decide?
I don't know how anybody decides.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we watch the same thing every night, you know, but, you know, I don't know how everybody makes up their mind, and a lot of stuff goes on your DVR, and people binge and all that, and that's all great. You know, Netflix has all kinds of great shows, and Amazon has great shows, and then HBO and Showtime and all those other ones. I don't know how anybody has time to work through 1% of it, but it's all out there, you know, and everyone's making money. Yeah. That I can tell you. Everyone's making money.
Yeah. It's just that the audience is so segmented now.
Yeah.
That's really the key.
Yeah.
Did I get to my quote with Edmund Kean?
I don't think you did. I think I probably interrupted you.
You
and
did.
Didn't get a chance to get to it.
Okay. So Edmund Kean was I already just said this, Shakespearean actor in the Renaissance, and he said, "Dying is easy. Comedy is hard." So what does that mean?
Well, I think what he was saying is that it is a bit of a challenge sometimes to make people laugh. Alcohol helps, but we we have to find a way to make you guys laugh. Now, for all of us on our show, it's pretty easy because we were the class clown, and again, we were desperate for attention, and so we're cracking jokes. We're doing what we would be doing anyway. It's just that now we're being paid handsomely for it and not disrupting things at AT&T, you know. Yeah, it's hard to make people laugh, but I think it may be in some ways easier to make people cry than to make them laugh. But I don't want to I don't want to disparage the work of any other writer because I know how hard writing is. It's really hard, and anybody that can do it and make a living at it is a friend of mine.
Yeah, and I know. I mean, rejection is so much a part of what the business is about.
Yeah.
I remember someone told me this story. I don't know if it was you, probably you, said that he gave a script to an older, distinguished writer and said, could you read this? Tell me what you think. And the guy said, well, I'm going to hate it. And he said, how do you know? I haven't read it yet. He said, well, I hate everything I write. Why would I like what you write?
That's an honest answer. That's an honest answer. Yes. Yeah, because I hate everything I write too.
Talk about that for a second.
Well, it's just, I mean, when I'm on the stage and the audience is laughing at my joke, then I love myself. But up till that point, you're so afraid that it's not going to work, and you're so afraid that like even tonight as we sat down here, I'm like, what if they never laugh once, And I know this wasn't about making you laugh, but I desperately wanted to make you laugh, and so I have a little bit, so that's nice. But yeah, I don't like what I write, and once I see it up there, I'm like, hey. But I keep doing it.
You're a great rewriter, which is
well,
somebody
you have
said,
to be.
Yeah, well, I know that from experience. Yeah, I forget, it was Emily Dickinson or somebody said writing is rewriting.
Yes.
And I think that's true.
I thought it was Neil Simon, but
yeah.
It's one of them.
Oh no, I'm more literary than you are. But it is. I mean, nothing comes out fully formed, and even as you're writing individually or in a collaboration, you really have to. And I think that's part of the rejection part. You have to reject your own work in a sense and criticize it.
Yes, kill your children, as you said earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah, you absolutely have to do that.
Yeah. Well, have we covered all the bases? I don't know.
I guess so.
Who's in charge here?
You are.
Bobby's in charge, and she said, let's have a few questions. Are there any questions? What's Bob Newhart really like?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here you go. I do appreciate your work. I do watch Mom. But I said I appreciate your work. I do watch Mom. But what I notice is there are a heck of a lot more commercials than there used to be. So my question is, what is your time frame for a half-hour show?
22 minutes.
And the rest is commercial?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
When we first moved to Pasadena, we were in Hastings,
Okay.
Valley View. So
Oh, I was on Valley View too.
really,
Yeah.
in the apartment building or not?
No, a little further up next
You
to
had more
next
money
to the,
than I did. Okay. Yeah,
well, when I lived there as a child, and I had no money at all. But
Well,
my
this was 1966.
Oh, okay.
Our apartment was $145 a month, and $5 was for the refrigerator.
Okay.
My question for you is, you started at 250,
Yeah.
wherever you're at now. Where was that break? Who gave you that break? You may have said it, but I missed it.
It was.
I mean, to go from 250 to where you are now.
Well,
something had to happen.
Well, yes, as you work more, you get first of all, you get an agent. The minute you get a job, this is another fallacy of the business. Young people come to me and say, how do I get an agent so I can get a job? And I say, you need to get a job and then you'll get an agent. An agent doesn't want to represent someone who's unemployed. They want to represent someone who's making a ton of money so that they can take 10% of it. So the more I worked, the more my agent could go, he's in demand, everyone wants him, you're going to have to really pay up to get this kid, and so then they would. So that's how I started making what I call elephant bucks. Was from that. I wrote a book called that, by the way.
Any more questions?
This is really a comment. I
recently binge watched MASH. They had a whole day. I was working at my desk, and I just want to I think that was one of the greatest shows in television history. And I want to thank you for your contribution.
Well, yeah, thank you. I made a tiny, tiny contribution to that show, but it was enormous privilege to get to work on that show, and they were all so wonderful to me in the time that I spent there. And I got to know Alan Alda, and I got to know Mike Farrell, and it wasn't too long ago that, and Bill Christopher, who lived here in Pasadena on Bellefontaine, and all the writers on that show, and Larry Gelbart, who developed it for television. Brilliantly talented people, and it was just a joy and a privilege to work with all of them. And we had a little bit of a kind of an accidental reunion. What was it, about a year ago or something like that, sweetie? One of the writers on MASH had passed away, and we had a little memorial for him at the Writers Guild, and I got to see all these people from MASH that I hadn't seen in years. And Mike Farrell came with his wonderful wife, Shelley Fabaret, who, as my wife knows, I've had a throbbing crush on since I was 12 years old.
Johnny Angel.
Yeah.
Anybody remember?
And I got to work with Shelley Fabaret on Coach, because she was the female lead on that show. Mm-hmm. And I love to tell the story, which my wife is now hearing for the 75,000th time. But when Shelley came in to read for Coach, and I was such a fan of hers from the Donna Reed show, I just got up, practically with tears in my eyes, and I said, "Mary Stone, I've been in love with you since I was 12 years old, and we have been dear friends ever since." And I got to see her, and she, as Annette said to her the last time we were with her, "You have Sheldon's heart," and it's absolutely true.
A lot of other folks too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to steal the last question.
Yes.
You were on two shows that have amazing finales, MASH and Newhart.
I wasn't there for either one.
Well, my question is this. When you're writing, let's say for Mom,
Yeah.
are you already thinking about the finale, and is there pressure there?
No, I've never thought about that, and we've talked, generally in the room about where we want the series to end up. We have a very vague idea of where we want it to end up, but how we're going to actually bring it in, I don't know. I'd love to be there this time. Because Newhart, I wasn't there anymore, and MASH, again, I was a freelance writer on MASH. I wrote a few episodes, and then I went off to do other things. But no, I don't. And I know that they didn't know how Big Bang was going to end, because they are on the same floor with us, and I remember them all walking around tearing out their hair for a year, trying to figure out how they were going to bring it all home. But I think they did beautifully, if you saw the last episode.
Yes,
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, first of all, so
My
much.
pleasure. Thank you all for coming.
Amazing.